Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Nikita Vizniak, and today I am here with the amazing,
Dr. Matt Nagra.
and I've known Dr. Matt now for over 6 years, 7 years, and he is one of the smartest guys that I know. He is on the ball for nutrition, anything plant-based you want to know about. This is the doctor that you want to speak to. He's been a huge proponent and involvement in our newest nutrition book that we've just finished writing. I know he's involved in other nutrition books as well that he's working on. And he's really making a difference in the world. And I think it's really worth our time to hear what he has to say. So I just wanted to say thank you, Matt, for being here. And it's fantastic to see you again.
And thank you for having me. And actually, when you said, 6, 7 years ago, now I'm thinking it was the first day I was student for a day at
Yeah.
Boucher. I was student for a day, and I was in your class, actually, and you made me come up to the front and answer questions I knew nothing about.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, I remember all that.
Yeah, so I put you on the spot a little bit, but now you're actually out there doing professional speaking all over the place and making a big difference in the world. And that's one of the main reasons that I wanted to have you on here today. Is I just wanted to say thanks for doing what you do and keep on doing it. Is what I'm trying to promote here is the optimal health, which kind of leads us to our first question. So, how do we know what is the healthiest diet?
Well, that's the $1 million question. So there is no one optimal diet. What we know are that there are certain trends, there are certain food groups that are associated with better health outcomes, and there are commonalities amongst those who have like the healthiest diets and lifestyles. And really what it boils down to are dietary patterns that are rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. Now that can be with or without some animal protein. And if you are including animal proteins, the best sources are going to be low-fat dairy products and fish, more so than others. Potentially small amounts of lean meat, but if you get up to daily servings, you're going to be running the risk of increasing, say, cardiovascular disease, all-cause mortality in those. But again, in limited amounts, in small enough amounts, you can have a little bit of almost anything, really.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
think it's an important thing to get is the portion control. Absolutely, right?
yeah, exactly. And so it is, we just want to be maximizing the amounts of those whole plant foods that we're consuming and minimizing the rest, whether that is a lot of these animal foods we talked about or, the ultra processed foods that many people are consuming. In fact, a recent statistic I was just reading in the US shows that they're getting 70+% of their calories from processed foods, which is,
Yeah,
it's
scary.
kind of the opposite of what you want there. So, these are the sort of patterns that we need to look at. And I know we're talking before this, some populations that we can learn from are actually known as the blue zones. So these are these 5 populations around the world who live to be 100 or older at a higher rate than basically anybody else. And these places are Icaria, Greece, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Loma Linda, California, Okinawa, Japan, and Sardinia, Italy. And all of these populations eat a predominantly plant-based diet. However, it's not just the diet. We have to look at the other determinants of health. They have great social structure. They have good family life. They're very supportive in that sense. They exercise regularly, although they aren't going and working intensely in the gym or anything.
Yeah, and
Right?
absolutely. I think that was one of the key things because we were both reviewing that literature and research ourselves together there as we were doing this nutrition text. And absolutely, it's physical activity is made part of their day, not that you have
Mhm.
to go to the gym, right?
Exactly. And so they're out gardening. They're working in ways that are having them even just walk around and move in some way. And so they aren't just sitting on their butt for, I don't know, 10, 12 hours a day, whatever,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
whatever the averages are. I'm not sure the exact stats there, but I'm sure it's a lot. And so we want to look at these other factors. They also don't smoke or limit smoking. Same with alcohol consumption. It's either no alcohol consumption in certain populations, like a lot of the Adventists, but then minimal alcohol consumption up to a couple drinks a day in other places like Sardinia, Italy, for example. And so we have to look at it from the perspective of lifestyle, not just diet, but diet plays a large and arguably the biggest factor in achieving healthy longevity.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even one thing that a lot of people may not realize is your diet can even influence your genetic expression as well,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah. There's like emerging data there. It's something that I think we just need to learn a lot more about, but there is absolutely data on like acetylation and methylation of genes, which turns on or turns off certain genes based on what you're actually consuming. So there's a lot there that we have yet to learn, which is why for now, let's base our recommendations on the human outcome data. So what actually happens to your disease risk when you consume certain foods And we can, as time goes on, learn a little bit more about why we notice these trends. And that might come in the form of certain like genetic expression as
So
well.
it seems like the research is pretty clear on this, right? Mostly plant-based diet is going to be a win. Low processed or no processed foods are going to be helpful as well.
Yeah.
But you hear these stories about people doing well on a keto diet or a carnivore diet or, old world paleo diet. What are your thoughts on this?
So there's a lot of thoughts on that. So there are certain short-term metabolic benefits to consuming things like ketogenic diets. There was a great review that was just published 2 days ago, I believe. I just read it yesterday, looking at the research on, say, blood sugar regulation on a ketogenic diet, or even short-term weight loss on a ketogenic diet. But when we look at the long-term follow-ups, the results aren't so impressive. A lot of the time they end up gaining the weight back. Long-term adherence is really poor. We don't know about disease risk. And actually, we have some data on people consuming these low-carb, typically higher animal food diets, where they'll lose weight and their LDL cholesterol will still go up. Yep. Now, that's tragic, because losing weight itself should be one of the most powerful things you can do for your LDL cholesterol and your blood sugar regulation and all of that. So if you're seeing those numbers go the opposite direction with weight loss, or even not moving at all, there's something missing there. And so we have to pay attention to what are the long-term risks going to be. And we just don't have a lot of data at this point. Now, getting into paleo and looking at what our ancestors ate, I think there's a huge misconception there. Back then, the goal was to eat, or was to not just eat a particular diet. It was to eat enough calories and sustain yourself long enough to reproduce. That's what natural selection cares about. Today, our goals are to live as long as possible and be mobile for as long as possible.
As long and healthy as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Have the richest, fullest life for as long as possible.
Exactly. The goal isn't to live to be 30 anymore. It's to be 100. And so we miss that when we're looking at, you can sustain yourself on just about any diet into your 30s. It doesn't really matter what you're eating at that point. Even heart disease doesn't typically hit people till they're 50, 60 plus. And so we don't expect to see high rates of heart disease in our paleo ancestors, and that because, again, they weren't living long enough to see it actually affect them. And so that is just something I think we need to move away from. We need to move away from this idea of eating like our ancestors, because we don't want to live like our ancestors.
Mm-hmm. So you had a lot of excellent information. You're, obviously up on all the research and literature, but one of the toughest things we both find clinically in practice always is, how do I make people, or how do I help encourage people to make a transition to a healthier diet? What are some of your key tips there?
So it depends where their starting point is. So as I always do, I'll go through their current diet. I'll see where they're at. I'll learn a little bit about what are their financial means, what are certain struggles or barriers to them changing. Are they living with family members that eat a certain way? And there's all these other factors to consider. But let's say we're taking somebody who's on a standard American diet or a standard Canadian diet, and we want to change them over to a healthier, more plant-centric diet. Well, I'll start with one meal at a time typically. I'll just say, what do you think is going to be the easiest meal for you? Usually it's breakfast. And we'll go through, okay, here are a few things we can try over the course of the next couple of weeks. And I want you to rotate through them, see what you like, and ultimately just nail that meal. So we'll start with, simple oatmeal. You can do steel cut oats, some berries, some bananas, some flax seeds. There's a variety of combinations there, super easy. Another one might even be a whole wheat toast with almond butter and some sliced banana on it. Another really easy one. We can do a tofu scramble. We can do an avocado toast. And we'll run through these simple ideas. And it gets to the point where they've just nailed it, and they don't have to think about it anymore after trying it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks if they need. Then we move on to lunch. Then we move on to dinner, and we do it one at a time.
But I think what you did there is you hit the nail right on the head. Is you have to give people choices, because even just the thought of coming up with something, you have to give them ideas that they can work forward with, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't do specific meal plans. I don't say, okay, on Monday you're eating this, 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 and this. Tuesday you're eating this, this, and this, because people don't follow them. They're really hard to follow and they're too strict. So what I like to do is, for this particular meal, here's a bunch of options you can try. And figure out what you like. You might like different things than I do, and that's fine. Just, they're all healthy. They're all including a variety of food groups, and off you go. And then, like I said, we go into the other meals. But I also see a lot of people who are generally eating okay. They're eating fairly well, but they want to eat even better. Mm-hmm. And so if that's the case, then I take more of like a substitution approach. So we'll look at their meals. If they're eating, say, the spaghetti is always the example I use because it was my favorite meal as a kid. I love the white pasta with meat sauce, actually.
Nice.
And so that is a very easy meal to transition over. What we'll do is we'll sub out the white pasta for some whole wheat pasta or even some lentil or bean pasta, sub out the meat sauce for a tomato sauce, and then we'll chop up some veggies and broccoli, kale, maybe throw some peas in there into the sauce. And you've added whole grains, you've added vegetables, you've possibly added legumes if you've thrown lentils in there or you're using a lentil pasta. You've so changed the overall makeup of that meal. You've increased fiber content, you've decreased saturated fat, you've just benefited across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's just some simple fundamental things that we can do. I just made a post just on some recent research as well, just talking about how diet can influence musculoskeletal pain symptoms. And a lot of people are just not even physically aware of this basic connection, right? So when you're looking at this and you're thinking about, okay, so this is how I'm going to help transition you to a healthy diet. When you think about the determinants of health, what really determines if you have a long-term, healthy, happy life, what are your top 3 things you try and get your patients and clients to do?
Are we talking beyond just diet or diet specifically?
Everything. You can go diet or beyond. Whatever. What do you
Everything?
think is the
Okay.
most important
Yeah.
to get people?
Yeah. So I would say diet and exercise are the 2 biggest ones I would like to hit there. But I think one, and this might just be my bias based on the population that I see in practice, but stress management is just massive.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. I see, people are fatigued, they're not sleeping properly, and they'll want to find out what's wrong. They'll want to find out, okay, well, what's going on? Why am I feeling this way? We'll run the blood test. Their iron's fine, their B12's fine, their hemoglobin, everything all fine. And then I'll come back and be like, look, your thyroid checks out, everything checks out. I think this is coming down to stress management or sleep modification, which again, if we were to throw a 4th one, I'll say sleep.
Yeah.
And so it's all of these factors. And I think those are some of the hardest ones to modify. I actually think diet and exercise are easier to change for a lot of people than it is to work on stress, because that's related to your family life, it's related to your work situation, whatever that might be.
It's related to biopsychosocial
Yeah.
interactions. It's related to
Exactly.
things that are often in habit ingrained into people and much more difficult to change, right? And
Yeah.
even to identify the specific triggers for people. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent,
No, I
Matt. Well, I want
100%
to thank
agree.
you so much for doing this. Is there anything else you want to give our viewers as just kind of a parting gift or anything like that?
Well, I mean, if I was to offer one piece of advice if people are looking to change, is that, like I said, start small. Start with 1 meal if you need. Start with these small, simple swaps if that sounds better to you. And if you fall off the wagon, or I don't even like that term, if you slip up in any way, then just hop back on. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's not all or nothing. Every swap you make or every step you take towards that healthier diet overall and healthier lifestyle overall is going to lead to benefit. And we've seen that in the research as well.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Matt. I just got to tell you how proud I am of what you're doing and the difference you're making. And the more doctors we get on board with this foundational medicine application here, the better results we're actually going to see. So thanks again for doing this, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for doing the interview and for everything you've taught me, of course, over the years as well.